Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So, good morning and welcome to Trinity College. Thanks for giving up your Saturday morning to come in. Hopefully you'll be able to find out a lot during the course of the day as to whether studying here in Trinity is what you want to do next year or the year after. My name is Oran Doyle. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Teaching and Learning in the School of Law. I'm a lecturer in Constitutional Law and in Jurisprudence, which is sort of philosophy of law. And I've been asked to come in this morning to talk to you a little bit about what's entailed in the study of law and in particular how the sort of pans out in Trinity, so you can make comparisons between Trinity and other places that you might be misguided enough to think that you want to go and study law. So I'm going to talk probably for about 15 to 20 minutes. I'll try to keep it closer to 15 minutes, then open it up. So if you have any questions, you can ask me, and other people can learn from the answers that I give as well. And in terms of talking, I'm going to try and do two different things. I'm going to just talk briefly or give you a flavour of the sorts of things that might be covered in law lectures, so you've got an idea of what law itself might be like. And then I'll talk sort of more administratively about how the degree programs are structured, what you study, the number of years, and so on. Okay? One of the subjects that I teach is focused around the question of what is law. You can spend your life answering that question, but as a starting point, we might think of law as being to do with rules that in some way regulate social conduct, okay? What people are allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, what they have to do if they want to achieve certain things like making contracts or transferring land, making wills, all of that sort of stuff, okay? And you can think of law in two fundamentally different ways. So you can imagine yourself as being an internal sort of participant within the legal system who wants to know what they can do, who wants to be able to make legal arguments that other people would think are good legal arguments. So there's sort of a idea there of law as a normative discipline, okay, a discipline telling people what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do, but only some arguments count as good arguments within that, okay, and lawyers are trained to know what are the good arguments, what are the bad arguments, what would judges accept if ultimately it went to court. And so a lot of what you will be studying in law school, if you come to law school, is those sorts of things, okay? What is the law? What counts as a good argument? What obligations do you owe to somebody if you're driving a car and they're in a bike? How careful do you have to be, okay? What rights do you have vis-a-vis your neighbour? What rights do you have vis-a-vis the state, okay? And you need to know what those sorts of arguments are, and a lot of what you do in law school is learning those through different, we would call them doctrinal subjects like land law, European Union law, company law, and so on. But you can also think about law in other ways. You can see it as a social phenomenon, as something that exists in society. You can see it as a location or a source of power that can be used to control people. And so it's also important, particularly in the academic study of law, to be able to step outside the discipline, okay? Not just to act like lawyers, but to see what law is, what it means for other people, okay? How it can be used and misused. Should we have laws at all? Maybe we should be anarchists. Maybe that would be a better way of approaching the world. What's the justification for having law, okay? What criticisms can you think of the laws that we have, okay, to engage with? Should you obey the law, for example? Do you have a moral obligation to obey the law? Or are there circumstances in which you should be allowed to disobey it, say if the law is terribly unjust? But then how do you know whether something is unjust, okay, and who gets to decide that? So all of those sorts of questions are important as well, and they are also ones that you would come across a lot in your academic study of law here. So really what we're trying to do with our students is to inculcate them into two ways of thinking. So to be able to work as internal participants within a legal system, to know what the law is, what's a good legal argument, what's a bad legal argument, okay? But also to have that sort of external perspective on it as well, and to be able to critically engage with it, to understand it as a social phenomenon and not just as an insider working the system for what they can get out of it. Okay? So, to put a bit of flesh on that, if you think of the subject that I lecture to first years, constitutional law, a lot of that concerns what rights we as citizens and as people living in this country have against the state, okay? And we have a constitution which protects certain fundamental rights and gives to the courts the power to decide whether legislation is consistent with that constitution. Okay, so the courts have the power to declare legislation unconstitutional, which, if you're really concerned about democracy and majority rule, is obviously sort of problematic, because what the majority want in any particular instance may be overturned by courts who clearly aren't a majority. But the courts have to do it by reference to the constitutional text in some way. So it's not the judges thinking, this is what I would like the law to be. Instead, they're sort of saying, is what has been made law by the Oireachtas, by the legislature, is that inconsistent with the Constitution? A recent case in which these sorts of arguments were considered was the case taken by Marie Fleming last year and then decided by the Supreme Court earlier this year. If you follow the news, you would have come across this. She was in advanced stage suffering from multiple sclerosis and effectively wanted a declaration from the courts that she could be assisted to commit suicide, that she wanted to be able to end her own life at a way that she saw as consistent with her dignity, and the condition that she was in was harrowing indeed, and you could certainly understand where she was coming from in wanting that. The problem for her was that in the mid-1990s, the Oireachtas, at the same time as decriminalising suicide, made sure that assisting people to commit suicide was still criminal. Okay, so that's a criminal offence, and so she wanted her partner to be able to help her take her own life, but he would have been liable for criminal sanction if he did that. And so she wanted the courts to say that that was unconstitutional. And so she argued that there was a right to autonomy, effectively, protected in the Constitution, which should allow her exercise her self-determination about when her life came to an end. And ultimately, the Supreme Court didn't accept that argument. So it was very sympathetic to her and her plight, but there was sort of two things going on, really. First, the court thought, okay, there's some instances of autonomy rights in the Constitution, but there's nothing as broad as that. Okay, an autonomy right, a right of self-determination. There's nothing in the Constitution as it is written that allows for that. But they were also concerned that the courts shouldn't be making these sorts of judgments unless absolutely necessary. So the legislature had already decided that this should be criminal, and the courts didn't want to be the ones second-guessing that. Okay, right, that's a 4-minute summary of a case that you could talk for hours and hours about, but those are the sorts of issues that you would be looking at in law school and constitutional law. But as well as looking at it in that way, you'd also be trying to step outside and say, ask questions, well, what rights should she have? Should people be allowed to have another person assist them and take their own life? Why would you want that? Why might you not want that? Also, should the courts have the power to determine these sorts of questions? Is that democratic? How can you justify that? Okay? So just to give you a flavour of the sorts of things that you would study if you came to law school here. Okay. Next thing to address, who would be interested in this? Okay, there's a question that people often ask, well, what sort of student would make a good law student? Well, I think really all sorts of students can make good law students, and the law has sort of different intersecting ways of thinking that appeal to different people. But I think it should appeal to students who are interested in society. Okay, how does society work? Who has power within society? Why do they have power? Should they have that power? How does that power get exercised? Okay, so that's one aspect of law. I think it should interest people who are concerned with justice or injustice. Okay, so is there injustice in society? If so, how can you combat that? Can you use the law to combat that? Can the law be used to help people? There's a problem-solving element. Okay, if you do study law and you go on into legal practice, which probably there are a lot of our students who don't go on into legal practice. They use the law to go into other careers, but a lot of legal practice is solving problems for people. They come and say, "My life has got messy in this respect. I don't like it. Is there anything I can do about it? And can the law be used to improve the situation?" Okay. And also, there's sort of a conceptual element to it and an idea of logical thinking. So you take the laws and you're trying to work out what do they mean in particular factual situations. Can you deduce conclusions from them? So if those are the sorts of things that interest you, any of those sorts of things that interest you, I think a law degree is something that you would get quite a lot out of. Of course, in Trinity we don't just have one law degree, we have 5. Okay, we have the pure law degree, and then we have joint degrees, law in French, law in German, law in business, and law in political science. So I'll just talk a little bit first about how the pure law degree is structured, and then explain how the others differ from that. They're all 4-year degrees, and in the first 2 years of the pure law degree, and really of the others as well, what you're doing is you're covering the basic building blocks of the legal system, right? The most foundational legal subjects: constitutional law, criminal law, land law, European Union law, contract law, how to make contracts, those sorts of really sort of fundamental building blocks of a legal system. Then in your third, and they are all compulsory, okay, and you're in large enough classes because all of the students are doing them, so the class is probably about 180 to 200 students. Alongside the classes, the lectures, you have seminars where you're broken up into classes of about 15 students who meet every 2 weeks to look at a particular area in more depth, and it's much more discussion-based and discussion-focused. Then, in the final 2 years, you've got a completely free range, okay? A free choice over a wide range of modules. We have about 30 modules on offer, and more or less you're choosing 6 or so each year, okay? Some modules are weighted heavier than others, but for the standard size module, you'll be choosing 6 of them. And some of those are still fairly fundamental subjects that nearly everybody does, such as company law, but there's also more unusual subjects that allow students to pursue their own particular interests, and where you'll find yourself in smaller classes with a wide range of different teaching techniques being employed by the lecturers. So, for example, you could choose immigration and refugee law, international human rights law, child law, sports law, medical law, okay? Just mentioning those. If you go to our website, which is tcd.ie/law, you'll see the full list of all the modules that you can study and descriptions of them and who lectures them and so on, okay? But just to illustrate the breadth of choice that you have there. In your third year on any of the degree programs, compulsorily in the law in French and law in German program, you can go abroad. Okay, and we've got links with a wide range of universities in Europe, North America, Australia, Asia, a lot more coming on stream. And really, we have links with some of the best universities around the world. Okay, so we have links now with Sydney and the Australian National University, which are sort of top 10, top 15 law schools in the world. We're setting up a link with Hong Kong. We're setting up a link with Notre Dame in the US, okay? And the way that works is you just pay your fees to Trinity, whatever they will be. They're not going to be that much. And you get to go to the other university for free. You don't have to pay any fees to them. So in the case of the US ones, where you'd be paying $50,000 for that experience, if you were studying in the US, instead you're just paying whatever the student contribution charge will be for you in a few years' time. More than you would like, I'm sure, but still an awful lot less than $50,000. So a lot of our students do that. About 70 of the 180 would go abroad for their third year and to take advantage of that opportunity. That's 180 across the 5 degrees. The way the other degrees are different, as you would expect, is that you're doing less Irish law and more something else. And the law in business and law in political science are split pretty much 50-50 in the first 2 years. And then in your third and fourth year, you can start to push it more towards law or more towards business or political science. Okay? In law in French and law in German, what you're studying is Irish law, French law through French and the French language, or German law through German and the German language. And the division there is sort of 2/3 Irish law, 1/3 the law and language of the other country. With all of these, probably the pressure comes on in terms of meeting your requirements if you want to go on to be a solicitor or a barrister. Obviously a law degree, as I'm sure you know, doesn't qualify you to practice law. You need to get a professional qualification. Those professional training bodies require you either to sit exams in certain subjects or to have passed certain subjects during your degree. All of our joint degree subject courses are set up to allow you to do that. but you just find yourself constrained in being able to do the more unusual subjects. You're using third and fourth year to cover the subjects that students in the pure law degree probably did in first and second year. Okay? But that's the swings and roundabouts of it, because obviously if you do a joint degree, you're getting the opportunity to study loads of subjects that the students in the pure law degree don't have. Okay? So it's I wouldn't really argue for doing one over the other. It's really just a question of what appeals to you, and notice that there are advantages and disadvantages with each, okay? But it sort of evens out across the board, I think. Then just to say possibly a few words about what students here, I think, like about studying in Trinity. I don't particularly like when I'm asked why study in Trinity and not somewhere else. First of all, the people who asked you that question have a tendency to disbelieve whatever you say, because they think it's just a spiel that you've learnt off. But I suppose some of the features, maybe to talk about the features that we're particularly proud of, there's a comparatively small, cohesive community here, I think in Trinity itself, but particularly within the law school. And there are very good academic, scholarly relations between the staff and the students. And I would encourage you, obviously, to go to the desk in the exam hall in Front Square and talk to the people there and talk to the students and hear their experience of it. But I think I can say that, and I think they would agree with me, that there is a small, friendly atmosphere for, as seen in various things. We have a walk that staff and students go on in October. There'll be a fiercely competitive staff-student soccer match in next term. The students usually win that, but I think we held them to a draw last year. And unfortunately, they have a slightly wider and fitter body of people from whom to draw their players. We also have a cabaret every year where we rent a venue. I think it's been the Sugar Club in the last few years, and the students do skits of all the lecturers, and we do skits of them. But all that, it's good fun in and of itself, but it wouldn't happen if there wasn't a good relationship there in the first place. Okay, nobody else really in the university believes that we can do this and get away with it, but we do it and the students get a lot out of it. But I'm mentioning it more just as it's indicative of the sort of atmosphere that's there in the first place. Okay, but talk to the students. Okay, that's probably the most important thing you can do here today, is talk to students who are on the programs already and see how they find them. We're intensely dedicated to undergraduate teaching and learning. Okay, we take it hugely seriously, and we're very innovative in the things that we do. A few examples of that: we have introduced a module on legislation and regulation in the first year that students on the Pure Law programme do. Other universities don't have this type of course, but it's one where you focus on law not just through cases, but law, which is increasingly important, through legislation made by the Parliament and through regulation. Okay, so we're constantly innovating in what we do. We've got different approaches. I'll just mention one module that's taught in third and fourth year, and some of our modules at that stage are capped, so you have 20-25 students to ensure a seminar type approach. Several modules are co-taught, so that you have two lecturers in the room with you and they're arguing or discussing with each other and discussing with you, which brings the standard up. And one of the modules, called Critical Perspectives in Law, what the lecturers do is they take ideas that you've encountered in the first 2 years as being fundamental building blocks, and then they try to completely subvert them. And one of them will argue as to why this is the worst thing ever, and the other person will try to defend it. Okay? Again, I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think there's that level of innovation in undergraduate teaching in the other universities. So we take it hugely seriously, and if you come here as undergraduates, it's something that you would benefit from. Apart from that, you have the advantages of just Trinity in general, the city centre campus and all that brings in terms of closeness to the things that are in the city centre that anybody would be interested in, but also in terms of closeness to the courts, closeness to the Parliament, where all of this law stuff is going on, and it's an aspect of a lot of the modules that you make visits to the courts, you observe what is going on, and that sort of thing. Okay, before I open it up for questions, just to mention two things that you could be interested in. As I have said, please go to the stand in the exam hall, talk to students there. Some staff members will be there during the day as well. But I think from your perspective, you get a particularly useful insight from the students who are here. Okay, they're in a very similar position to you, and they can answer the sorts of questions that you're interested in, and they've no vested interest. Okay, so I think you can take at face value what they say. If you have further technical questions that you want to know about, you should go to our website, tcd.ie/law. Okay, all of the detailed information about the law programs is there, more than can be fit into any paper prospectus. If you feel that you would like to attend a law lecture, okay, to see how that works, okay, to help you decide if this is something you want to do, you should email us. It's law.school@tcd.ie, but again, on the website you'll get that sort of information. And then finally, in relation to something else that's on today, you're probably, hopefully aware of the feasibility study that Trinity is operating to see can there be an alternative to the CAO points system for access to college. That will apply for the pure law degree as well as other degrees in the college for you if you're applying this year or next year. And there are 2 talks on that today, okay? And they're on at 11:30 and 1:30 in the Emmett Theatre, which is in the Arts Building. I know you've all been handed out, I think, as you arrived in college today, you've got a brochure explaining this, but I'd encourage you to go to those talks if you are considering applying for the pure law degree next year, so that you understand how that works. I could answer questions on that, but seeing as those questions will be addressed at those talks later, I think I'd like to use whatever time is left, 7, 8, 9 minutes or so, to take any questions from you about other matters relating to the law programs. So if anybody has any questions, draw attention to yourself. Yeah. Is there, so I think the question, I think I heard, but to make sure everybody else heard as well, is there an option for moot courting? Yeah. Yes, in 2 ways. Okay, so in your second year, you study a module called Private Law Remedies, which is the remedies you can get for cases in contract, tort, land, and so on. And related to that, we have a compulsory mooting program. Okay, so a moot court is where a hypothetical legal problem is set, and then you as students have to write a written argument, a brief or a memorandum on one side or the other, and then you argue out the point in front of people who are acting as if they were judges. Okay, so all students have to do that in their second year. And then in addition to that, there's an opportunity to yourselves to volunteer to participate in various moot court competitions. So there are international moot court competitions, Irish moot court competitions, and the law school is very supportive of that, but they work as sort of a co-curricular voluntary exercise, but that you have got some training for through the compulsory mooting in second year. Okay? Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah, so there's a careers officer in the law school who arranges events for students, and this week or last week he had an event of people who had trained as lawyers but who are no longer working as lawyers in different areas, so to show students that side of things. We also, there's a career service in the college. We have a module now in 4th year, which I mentioned called Clinical Legal Education, where you can spend a term or a day, a week for the term, working in a legal organisation and seeing what they do. So there's a lot of, a lot of information is provided both by us to students, and then also there are various law firms and so on who come in and do recruiting as well. But I suppose we take up the slack to ensure that students know about the non-law based careers, because the law based careers are very much in front of you anyway. Okay? And I should probably one that was the point that I meant to make, that a lot of students don't go on into law degrees, so the sorts of, or law practice, the sorts of things they might go into would be public service, working for non-governmental organisations, working as journalists, and yeah, also international organisations as well. Sorry, yeah? No, the feasibility study is limited to Leaving Cert students at present, okay? Partly because one aspect of it is that they need to know the relative performance rankings, so where you fall within your school. We can't get that information outside schools in the Republic of Ireland. Okay. Yep. They go on to study after college? Employment? Yeah, I think, well, pretty much all of them get jobs after college. Okay. It's a lot of them, but usually it's not straight away, which is not to scare you, but a lot of students go on to do a master's first, or they go on to do their professional training. Okay, so we don't see them immediately a year after where they've got to. But our students get jobs. Okay, and I know there's been, I think the economy seems to be improving anyway. There has been in previous years a lot of coverage about how things have been bad for lawyers, and it's certainly been difficult. And maybe more of our students were going to London over the past 5 years than would have been 10, 15 years ago. But if you come out with a law degree from one of the good universities, probably not just Trinity in this regard, I'm not going to say who I think the other good universities are because that will only get me into trouble. But if you have a good university law degree, I think you will get a job. Okay? Yeah? The law lectures are mostly held in the Arts Building, and then some are held in the Hamilton Building. Okay? So they're not held here, thankfully, because this place is pretty horrible, as you've noticed. But there's, yes, the Hamilton Building is just the first one across the road when you go into college, and then the Arts Building is up at the top of the college. And so the classes in first and second year tend to be about 180 to 200 students. Okay, so they need to be in the large lecture theatres. Some then of the classes in third and fourth year will be held in the law school itself, where we have small teaching rooms that hold about 20 people and 40 people. Okay, but apart from that, they will be spread out mostly in the Arts Building. Okay, but it's a small campus, so you get around it fairly easily. Nowhere really is more than 5 minutes away from anywhere else. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I probably should have touched on that. In the subjects you have 3 hours a week. So really you have 9 hours lectures and 2 to 3 hours of seminars. Okay, so you're talking about 11, 12 hours contact time per week. But I think the rule of thumb is that you'll be doing about 3 hours work on your own for every hour of contact time that you have. Okay, so you should be doing about 40 hours a week. You have reading to do in relation to all your subjects and writing essays. A lot of the subjects are taught in a Socratic method style. So I, as a lecturer in constitutional law, ask questions from students in the class, and they have to have read the material before they go into class in order to be able to answer the questions. Okay, so overall I think about 40 hours a week, but sort of 10, 12 hours of that is contact time. Okay, I can probably take one more question if there is. Yeah, and I'll have to. No, it's the same, okay, it's just that you have less law in those degrees, okay, or they are meant to be the same anyway, okay, and that the workload is meant to be the same across all degrees measured across according to a uniform system. Maybe they're not quite, but they are pretty much the same, okay? Okay, well, thank you very much. I'll have to end to make sure that the next group can get in. If you do have any questions for me, you can come up to me, otherwise you can go to the stand. Thank you.